Hi everyone, welcome to Plant Transport Summary. Now this is a very large chapter, so I will first start off with the structures and specialized cells, then we will talk about the different transport processes. Okay, so first up, we have the xylem and the phloem. Okay, so we know that the xylem transports water and mineral salts or dissolved ions, okay, while the phloem transports sucrose and amino acids. Now, the structure of the xylem, it is hollow with no cross walls, meaning there are no cell walls between each cell. It is just a hollow tube, and this allows for faster and continuous flow of water through the xylem. You also see that it is lignified, okay, and this increases structural support. For the phloem, we see they have what we call sieve plates. Alright, and this actually helps in the loading of sucrose and amino acids. So this is where the food is being transported into the phloem. And the phloem has a degenerate protoplasm, meaning there are no organelles, there's only cytoplasm. And this reduces resistance of flow, because organelles will actually obstruct the flow. And if I want it to be a very fast transport, I will actually remove all the organelles and obstructions. You also realize that there are companion cells beside the phloem, and these companion cells actually have many mitochondria to release energy for active transport of the food, and it also keeps the phloem cells alive because the phloem has no organelles, so it requires the energy that come from the companion cells. Okay, so it's like a life support. Now let's compare the differences between xylem and phloem. Xylem is dead, phloem is a living cell. Okay, the xylem also has no protoplasm, so it is completely hollow, while the phloem has a degenerate protoplasm, meaning there's only cytoplasm left. And you realize that both of these are specialized in this way to increase the flow of substances. Xylem is unidirectional, transports from roots to the leaf, while phloem is bidirectional, so the leaf to the rest of the plant. It can go upwards, downwards, and so on. The next specialized cell that we're going to look at is actually the root hair cell. Okay, you have been familiar with this. It actually absorbs water and mineral salts from the soil. Okay, this is also covered in our cells chapter. It has this long protrusion called a root hair to increase surface area to volume ratio for fast absorption. And it also has these organelles. Okay, this is not chloroplast, but these are actually mitochondria. Okay, whenever we have a lot of mitochondria, it is to release energy for active transport. Okay, so water and mineral salts, right? Now, how does the root hair cell absorb these two items? Water, it will be by osmosis, and mineral salts is through diffusion or active transport, depending on the concentration outside and inside. Okay, so osmosis, many people are always confused with this term, as well as transpiration, evaporation, root pressure, etc. Now, osmosis is whenever it is into cells or from cell to cell. Because osmosis, it is the movement of water from high water potential to low water potential through a partially permeable membrane. So I need it to be a more zoomed in, and this is more of the micro concept. So if I am talking about cells, between cells where there is partially permeable membrane, I can use osmosis. Okay, while transpiration, evaporation, root pressure, they are more of macro concepts. There are more overall picture, is an umbrella term. Okay, if the water potential in the soil is low, alright, what's going to happen is that water will actually leave the roots of the plant instead. Right, so this happens when there is a high ion concentration in the soil. For example, if you put a lot of fertilizer into your plant, then it might actually cause water to leave instead of the plant being able to absorb water. Okay, now how does the plant actually prevent this is that the root hair cells will actually transport ions into the plant, and this helps to reduce the water potential of the plant, and the roots can now absorb water through osmosis. Okay, so I want my plant to have a low water potential always, even lower than the surroundings, so that water can flow in. So that is how the roots can actually absorb water even if there is a lot of ions outside. Alright? Moving on, we are going to look at the different arrangement of the vascular bundle. Okay, so we must know 3 different arrangements. I've color-coded for you the xylem and phloem. So the xylem will be blue, while the phloem is grey. Okay, so the first one we must know is the leaf. So if I cut the leaf, right, and you look at the cross-section, this is something that you would have seen in your leaf structure also. Okay, so the xylem is always on the top, while the phloem is at the bottom. Okay, and if I cut the stem, the vascular bundles are arranged around the perimeter. Okay, and the xylem will actually be in the middle, while the phloem is on the outside. So if you remember the experiment on aphids, right? Aphids is an insect that will pierce the stem to drink the phloem and all the sugars. So it can only do so because the phloem is on the outer perimeter. Okay, that is why aphids can actually feed on it. Now the last arrangement that we must know is in the root. So this is what a root looks like. Normally it has a star or a cross shape in the middle. That is my xylem, while the phloem is actually the little bundles at the side. So same thing, if you compare the root and the stem, the xylem is always in the middle, okay, while the phloem is on the outside. And you notice that the root is also surrounded by root hairs. Okay, so now that we have, kind of looked at the different specialized cells and the arrangement, we're going to jump into the transport processes themselves. Okay, so how does the plant transport food and water? Food is actually through a process called translocation. And the definition is, it refers to the transport of sucrose and amino acids in phloem tissues. Alright, so that is all you need to know about translocation. Basically, it's the transport of food through the sieve plate cells or the phloem cells. Alright, so you can link it back to the structure that we've talked about. For water, there are actually 3 processes: root pressure, capillary action, and transpiration, which is the most important one because transpiration is the main force driving water transport in a plant. Okay, so let's start off with the roots first because that's where water enters. So root pressure, what is it? It is the upward movement of water in xylem due to the pressure from continuous entry of water. So imagine I have a tube, right? Water is continuously entering and it causes the water to be pushed up the xylem. So same like an MRT. Imagine if a lot of people keep squeezing you, right, through the doors, you'll be just pressed into the MRT. Okay, so same thing, it pushes the water up the stem. Next, for capillary action, okay, it is due to the cohesion of water together and the adhesion of water to surfaces. So if I look at the stem, or any surface in particular, you realize that water actually kind of curves upwards at the sides because it sticks to the surface. This is what we call adhesion. Now, water also has another property where they want to clump together. This is what we call cohesion. So together they are known as capillary action. And how this helps is that when one water molecule moves upwards, it pulls the whole chain of water molecules upwards, as you can see here. Okay, so capillary action will help in moving the water up as well. Now, finally, and most importantly, we are going to talk about transpiration. Okay, definition of transpiration is the evaporation or the loss of water through the aerial parts of the leaf, which is basically, aerial parts of the plant, which is the leaves. And this actually generates a force called the transpiration pull. Okay, so if we're talking about a force, it is transpiration pull. If you're talking about process, it is transpiration. So you might want to distinguish that in your answer. Now, in order to better understand transpiration, we must look at the leaf structure again. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of jump back to plant nutrition and do a mini recap first. Okay, so now remember carbon dioxide path. It will enter the leaf from the outside atmosphere into the intercellular airspace. Then it will dissolve in the thin film of moisture. And then after that, it moves from the mesophyll cells, spongy mesophyll, to the palisade mesophyll, where photosynthesis is occurring through diffusion. Now, what about water? You see here that we have the xylem and the phloem, which is the vascular bundle. Water will come from the xylem, right? So it will undergo osmosis out, and then it forms the thin film of moisture. It will then evaporate into the intercellular airspace before it leaves into the atmosphere through the stoma. Alright, so in blue, we can see the path of water. So you must know these two paths very well. Okay, so the three key terms that you need to know. Number one is osmosis from cell to cell. Number two, evaporation from the thin film of moisture. And number three, diffusion outwards. Okay, so transpiration is actually made of these three processes. And you must know that transpiration occurs as a consequence of gas exchange, because when the plant is exchanging gas, right, the stoma is open. This will then allow transpiration to occur. Okay, so without gaseous exchange, we cannot have transpiration. So how do I then put these three concepts into words? Okay, so describing transpiration. Number one, water moves by osmosis from the xylem to the spongy mesophyll, right? Okay, so this is from a high water potential to a low water potential in the spongy mesophyll. The second part is that it then forms the thin layer of moisture on the spongy mesophyll. Alright, and this thin film of moisture evaporates into the intercellular airspace. So you can see from number 3, the diagram as well, water vapor then diffuses out of the leaf via stoma. Take note, it is diffuses, not osmosis, because now it is a gas molecule and not a water molecule. Now, this overall processes of evaporation of water decreases the water potential of the mesophyll cells because water is being continually lost, right? And this draws water from the neighboring cells and the xylem and generates a suction force that acts on the entire column of water from the roots to the leaves. This is what we call the transpiration pull. Okay, so the suction force is the transpiration pull. Now, to better understand this, let's take a look again at the diagram. Okay, so the yellow arrows, water is constantly evaporating from the mesophyll cells, and this draws the water from the xylem. Okay, and then if we look at the tube, water is being pulled out of the xylem, and this causes water to move up of the xylem. Alright, so similar to how you drink water from a straw, when one water moves into your mouth, the whole chain of water is being pulled up the straw. Now, the important keywords to know are the three processes: osmosis, evaporation, and diffusion. Okay, and other keywords are also the parts of the plant. So the xylem, spongy mesophyll, thin film of moisture, intercellular airspace, as well as the stoma. So all these terms that I've highlighted in blue, right, they need to be in your answer. Okay, so processes and the parts of the leaf. Now, we're going to look at transpiration factors. Okay, so remember, transpiration is evaporation. So those factors that are affecting evaporation will be the same factors that affect transpiration. Alright, so factors affecting transpiration rate, we have a graph over here. The y-axis will be transpiration rate, while the x-axis is temperature. Okay, so you can see that when temperature increases, transpiration rate increases, because increase in temperature will increase the kinetic energy of molecules and increases the rate of evaporation. Now, this graph can also be used for light intensity. So an increase in light intensity will actually increase transpiration because it causes the stoma to open bigger to take in more carbon dioxide. When I have more light, right, the plant will actually want to photosynthesize more to make more food for itself, and in order to do that I need more carbon dioxide. So light actually triggers the stoma to open wider to take in more carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. But at the same time, when I'm opening the stoma bigger, it actually just causes more water to be able to escape as well. Therefore, it increases the transpiration rate. So the plant actually needs to balance these two things, because I want more photosynthesis, but at the same time I allow more water to escape. Alright, so now we're going to move to wind speed. Increase in wind speed removes water vapor outside the leaf faster, and this increases diffusion. So it allows transpiration to occur faster as well, because water is constantly being removed, and then there is a very steep concentration gradient for diffusion. Now let's look at this rate graph. When this factor, humidity, increases, transpiration rate decreases. Okay, so it's the only one that is opposite in relationship. Why is this so? Because increase in humidity causes an accumulation of water vapor outside the leaf, right? And this reduces the concentration gradient for diffusion. So imagine there's a lot of water molecules outside in the atmosphere already. It actually reduces the diffusion of water from the intercellular airspace outside. Okay, so transpiration is slower when there's more humid conditions. Now lastly, let's talk about wilting. Okay, so this occurs when transpiration rate is actually greater than the rate of uptake of water. So I lose water faster than I can gain water. So this was called wilting. Now what happens is that in a normal condition, my cells are turgid, right? Because I have plenty of water and the stoma is opened wide. But when I have less water, what happens is that the stoma becomes flaccid and then it starts to close. Okay, and the cells of the plant become flaccid and they all start to droop down because there's not enough water. So during wilting, the stoma closes and the plant wilts, and this will help to prevent excess water loss. Okay, so again, you must realize that when my stoma is closed, I am preventing water loss, but at the same time, I am also not able to take in any more carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. So the rate of photosynthesis will drop when I'm trying to save water. So you need to realize that there is a balance between these two processes, photosynthesis and transpiration, and there are trade-offs that the plant must make. Okay? So that is about it for our entire chapter. I know there's a lot of content, but I hope that you guys find this video useful, and all the best with your studies.